Welcome to the Lucas Rockwood Show. I am a yoga teacher, I'm a trainer, a health coach, a serial entrepreneur, I'm a father. But first and foremost, I'm a student. I love learning. This show is about scratching my own itch to learn. I go out and find experts in their field, health and wellness, personal growth and development, and I do my best to share their best research with you so you can live a more fulfilled life, a more meaningful life, hopefully a more healthy life. On this week's show, we're talking about relationships, specifically relationships that have ended and how you can potentially wrap things up in a neat little package. That is kind of an ideal situation. It doesn't usually happen that way. But I think in the modern age, we need some strategies for this, specifically because of social media. I call it the lost art of forgetting. It's very difficult to forget anyone these days. It's completely possible that if you open up your phone right now and swipe through your Facebook feed, you will find people that have not been in your life for over 20 years and will not be in your life ever again. Is that a really smart use of your emotional bandwidth? I doubt it, but most of us are doing this. On this week's show, we'll talk specifically about how to deal with previous relationships, how to healthfully set boundaries, and hopefully set yourself up for healthy new relationships in the future. As always, your questions, comments, feedback are most welcome. Email me, podcast@yogabuddy.com. I also like voicemail, yogabuddy.com/Ask Lucas. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome everyone. It's Lucas here. Today's show is called Self-Help for Couples, and I am joined here with Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. She's a marriage counselor, a therapist, a life coach based in Denver and Colorado. She's the author of a book called Exaholic, Breaking Your Addiction to an Ex-Love. It's available on Amazon, also on her website where you'll find all of her resources and contact info, which is growingself.com. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Lucas, it's such a treat to speak with you. I have been practicing my coffee breathing in preparation for our conversation, so I'm ready.
So I know just the title of your book is going to trigger a bunch of our listeners, and they're going to immediately have questions and sort of, the street knowledge about how to deal with an ex. There's lots of different rumors about things that you should do, and I'm sure you have some clinical strategies that you've used. So for people listening to the show right now who have an ex that's in their life, maybe because of a custody issue, maybe just because they can't get rid of them on Facebook, maybe because they live next door, or in some cases they're even living in the same house. What are some simple strategies that you use in your clinical practice when you meet with somebody who's, got an addiction to an ex?
Yeah, well, there's an interesting, I think there's a spectrum, Lucas, and sometimes people have to maintain proximity with an ex for different reasons, like the one that you've described. But what I focus on in my practice is helping people who have an emotional attachment, that even though they rationally know that the relationship is not good for them and that they need to end it, they really feel like they can't, because there's a very addictive quality to romantic relationships, believe it or not. The same parts of our brain that are complicit in other kinds of addictions, to substances or process addictions, actually become activated when we fall in love. And so many times when people have sometimes even been traumatized by their partners, and they can understand that the relationships are unhealthy, they continue to feel obsessive thoughts about their ex, craving for contact, and they hate themselves for it. So our process is really around helping people gain awareness of what's going on, helping them understand their experiences in a different way, and then helping them achieve a sense of control so that they can be in charge of how they feel, as opposed to having their ex hold all the cards.
There's a real problem right now with social media, and I call it the lost art of forgetting. And what I mean by that is about a year ago, I kind of took stock of my Facebook account, and pretty much every woman I ever had a relationship with, and even every woman I ever dated, was a friend on Facebook. And it's a small list, but it's enough that it's not really healthy. I think it's important to be able to forget, not in a bury the past or hide from who you are. But I don't, at least for me, it's not really healthy for me to know what my 19-year-old ex-girlfriend is doing with her kids on a Saturday afternoon. And I'm just curious how social media has influenced or changed your practice over the years, how you help people think about this strategically. My strategy was I got rid of everybody. I have one Facebook friend right now. And so I'm curious what kind of strategies you encourage people to think about, because it's a very real thing. That emotional hit, I can get an emotional hit from somebody I literally haven't seen in 20 years ago. And it's not that it's negative, but since there is no present day reality with those emotions, it feels very similar to playing, Rolling Stones' Paint It Black. Love the song, but I need to put it away. I've listened to it 300 times, So I'm just curious how you think about this with clients.
You said it so perfectly, Lucas. You said an emotional hit. And particularly if there are people that there's like an emotional trigger around, such as an ex, if you have some unfinished emotional business, every time you see a post or an image of this person, it's like just like this laser shot of reactivation, I think is a good word for it. And having that reactivation is really a way of maintaining an emotional contact with a person, even though it's absolutely a digital experience and there's no personal contact. So if there are feelings for someone, certainly I always advise people to block or release those digital attachments, because it can really keep things going. And even more concerningly, there's one thing if you're trying to get over an ex, but I have also worked with so many couples where one partner has actually even inadvertently wound up rekindling an emotional or even physical affair with someone for their past that they never would have without the influence of social media.
Yeah, the block thing is a feature that people don't use enough. My block list is just hundreds and hundreds of people, and I have little rules for myself. If anyone even mildly irritates me or triggers me and they're not part of my life, I just block them. And I think people don't realize how quickly someone can drop. They can just drop from your consciousness. That news feed is such... It can be so toxic when someone who triggered you when you were 23 years old is suddenly triggering you again in midlife only because you allowed them into your feed. You can really drop them really quickly. It's a powerful tool. It's pretty hidden, because the social media networks like us to get those hits, unfortunately. So, you call this an addiction, and what kinds of things do you see? There's the obvious situation that I'm guessing most people listening know someone who's in a relationship or have left a relationship that was clearly bad, physically abusive, emotionally abusive, and they're irritated at their friend or their loved one for continuing to go back to that person. But what are other situations where people get into this kind of addictive behavior where we know it's bad, the same like the excessive drinking, the same like the binge watching Netflix and Haagen-Dazs, but we do it anyway? What kinds of why are we doing this? What is the motivation behind it?
Lucas, it goes so much deeper than a air quote bad relationship. I think if any of us, me, probably you, and everybody listening, can explore just for a moment their own feelings, I don't think that there's a human being alive who hasn't experienced at least some of this. And when you think about having a broken heart, having any relationship where you experienced intense feelings for someone and maybe they didn't feel the same way, or maybe the relationship wound up not working out, even for people who are the ones who do the breaking up or who ask for the divorce, we are all still impacted on a very deep physiological level by these attachment bonds, because human beings are built to form very powerful attachment bonds to one irreplaceable other. And any time that attachment is severed or broken, there is this powerful, and going into survival drives, Lucas, we're talking about the, maintenance of the human species here is connected to that is our attachment to other people. we are collective animals, and so everyone has experienced that. I know when this happened when I was a teenager, but I dated a guy for a couple of years, and it's very garden variety stuff. We wound up breaking up. He wound up dating a friend. But looking back at that time of my life, I was a wreck. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. It was all I thought of. Going to school with those people every day was just so traumatizing. And when I look back over the course of my life, and I've had, kind of a normal life with ups and downs just like everyone else. That was a uniquely awful experience for me. And I think if you talk to anyone, everybody has one of those stories where in the moment they feel like they're losing their minds. I mean, they are just thinking about their ex all the time. And so I wanted to say that because I don't want to pathologize this experience. And I think that's something that happens to people who are going through this. They feel so bad. They feel so out of control. And one of the core beliefs is, what's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me, that I'm so brokenhearted. Everyone tells me that this person wasn't good for me, that I should let it go, that I should move on. But I can't. And then that adds this like shame experience or self-judgment to what is already such a hard experience of just being brokenhearted. So it's not that this experience is rare, it's that it's absolutely normal. Everybody goes through it, and almost no one really knows how to handle it or how to resolve it other than kind of white knuckling it and, that time will heal. And that is actually not true either. I work with people who have been in this place for 3, 5, 9 years sometimes of this emotional hanging on, and it's not good for them.
What are some strategies for closing things properly? The current strategy is ghosting. I don't think that really is healthy for anybody. It seems, depending on the situation, but let's assume people are normal and things ended for garden variety reasons, to just block someone from your life without giving them any reason. It seems abnormally cruel. It seems insensitive. In some ways, it's not practical. They just need things from you. They need logistical things. But it's a really common strategy right now in the internet era is just to ghost. And what are some other strategies that people can use to really respectfully, forget, lose, block, disconnect from someone in a way that's very clear and respectful of what someone went, respectful of the time you had together and respectful of the time that you'd like to have now forever apart?
Yeah, well, and I think you're acknowledging the fact that there's often this power dynamic when it comes to breakups or ending a relationship. On the one side, there's the person who has probably for quite some time been thinking, I don't know if this is the right relationship for me for a variety of reasons. And so they are having this inner process where they're kind of disconnecting emotionally for weeks or months, and the other person might not know that. So the other person who is, still in love and wanting it to continue is often shocked and surprised if they are ghosted or somebody just abruptly cuts things off. They feel really legitimately blindsided. And so I think, if I had some advice for the people who want to exit a relationship, you're absolutely right. Just disappearing is very traumatizing. And it's really frightening for people who experience that. I think a much kinder and more respectful way is to have an authentic conversation, which is hard. I think people are afraid to be very honest. They're afraid of, air quote, hurting someone. And the reality is that not having that brave conversation is always more hurtful in the end. So to have a conversation and say, this is how I've been feeling, tell the story. I advise sometimes people to actually write a letter to give to the person that they're breaking up with, because when the conversation is happening, oftentimes the person being left becomes so flooded with emotion, their brain stops processing information. They can't really hear anything. And so to give them something they can read later to help them hear that story and make sense of it is very kind. And then also to avoid saying, well, maybe someday, or maybe we can still be friends, all of that only adds and prolongs to the pain. So to go ahead and cut that cord, not ghosting, but saying things like, so I'm not going to be calling you anymore, and I'm going to remove my social media profile from yours, and we're not going to be hanging out, and please don't text me. And, if it makes it any easier, we can just go ahead and block things. But I really think that we need a firm boundary. That is by far the most humane way to end it. But anything else simply prolongs pain.
And what do you think about someone who's in a situation where they're attempting to navigate relationships with multiple exes? And these situations, again, because of social media, are not uncommon. So someone might be even in a marriage situation where they have multiple long-term relationships lingering in the background. Person shows up somehow involved in their life, whether it's work or travel or whatever it is. What do you think about that as a concept? Is that, generally speaking, just a time bomb? What are your thoughts about that in terms of just intelligent coupling practices?
That's a great question, Lucas. And I think it depends a lot on the relationship and on the comfort level of both committed partners. So, for example, my husband is a ladies' man, Lucas. He makes friends with women. And so he's friends with his ex-girlfriends. He has female friends. But he really, and I think that this is true for all healthy relationship dynamics, I feel very included in that. When he talks to his ex or his female friends, he tells me what's going on. I'm included. I feel like, in some ways they're my friends too. And so that feels very safe for me. And also, I think in couples where one of the partners, for any reason, is feeling threatened or uncomfortable with the level of emotional intensity, I think that the partner's feelings about that must trump the friendship. So, for example, I know that if I said to my husband, you know what, your relationship with this person is starting to make me feel uncomfortable, that would be the end of it, because he would always choose me over that person. And so I think that it comes down to the couple being in agreement about what's happening, and that both partners feeling like they are always number one. I think that when couples get into trouble is when one partner is getting their emotional needs met by a air quote friend outside of the relationship, and also if their partner is expressing discomfort or distress, they are either, ignoring it, or if they're starting to interact with their air quote friend in secrecy. Those things are breeding grounds for emotional affairs, and emotional affairs are kind of the on-ramp to capital A affairs. And so those are the things that I would look for in a couple as to whether or not it's going to be problematic. It is not always a time bomb, though. It can be very healthy.
Let's touch on this emotional affairs thing, because I'm a middle-aged guy. Most people I know, this is what they're much more worried about than the real affair, and this is the much more problematic things, at least in the relationships that other relationships that I'm close with. People are much more concerned about this. And again, I think this is really a digital age thing where you can slide into a text message or a DM on Instagram. And these things are happening really often, and a lot of people think that it doesn't mean anything. And from what I'm seeing, it can be even more destructive than a physical affair. What are your thoughts on this concept of emotional affairs, especially like in a digital age? And what constitutes an emotional affair?
You're exactly right, Lucas, and we'll talk about what constitutes an emotional affair. But first of all, I want to acknowledge something that you said that was so profound, which is that people start DMing, they think nothing of it, and in the beginning, it really is quite benign. People don't think a thing of it, and so they engage in these interactions, and that is how it starts. And going back to the idea that we were talking about previously, because relationships are inherently biologically addictive, because nature, again, designed us to form these bonds. So we start DMing someone. It's, a fun conversation. We're enjoying it. We get a little zing every time we see the message from someone. And that is how it starts to happen. And people genuinely do not realize that they are beginning to slide into this activating kind of relationship with another person. And it happens on the subconscious level. And many times, by the time people are aware of it, it is too late. They have already developed this kind of pseudo attachment bond with this person that they've been corresponding with. And so, comparing this relationship to the day-to-day reality of their partnership with their spouse, the new relationship may have a lot more energy around it, and it feels very special to people. And then when their partner starts to protest, that's when it starts start sliding into secrecy because people move into protecting that emotional affair. And emotional affairs, I think, are so troubling and destructive because, sex is one thing. And I think in a culture where, among other things, pornography is so rampant, I think that we can look at sex as something that is less meaningful in many ways than our romantic partnership. But an emotional affair is love. It's an attachment. It's saying that this person is very important to me. And that is much more threatening to a relationship long term.
I guess one of the hard things is, no one can be everything to you. I think everyone feels at times just grossly alone in their relationship. There's huge parts of your life you'd like to share with your partner, and you can't. No one can be that for you, whether it's a interest in life, whether it's whatever it is, a penchant for Game of Thrones, whatever it is that you're into, there's always some things that your partner just cannot fulfill for you. And so it's natural that for these things that you're really passionate about, you'll go looking outside the relationship. And I think it's really difficult to navigate when that's healthy, me being a whole person, looking to not depending on my partner for every single need, which is totally impossible. I think it's pretty difficult to navigate that terrain and understand when it crosses a boundary. It seems like a pretty difficult thing to ascertain.
It really can be, but there are some simple guidelines that I think can make it easier for people to make those judgments around, yes, I would like to connect with someone about my nerdy Game of Thrones, obsession or whatever it is, but to be very self-aware, and one thing that we talk about all the time with our clients at Growing Self, and something that I hammer home constantly on my podcast, is always coming back to self-awareness and being really ruthlessly self-observant. And so if you have a friend and you feel a little bit of a tingle around them or some excitement, to be not kind of whitewashing that or blowing it off, but saying, you know what, I think I'm enjoying my time with this particular person a little bit too much. And so what are things that I can do to either minimize that or include my spouse in it? And that immediately will begin to diffuse the emotional intensity of the situation, and it will create a layer of safety there. Also, something I advise people to do is simply come clean to their spouse. I'm having some little crushy feelings for this person that we've been hanging out with, and I just need to tell you about that. And almost immediately, that will make those crushy feelings go away. I mean, one thing that I talked about fairly recently on my own podcast is the experience that I think a lot of long-term coupled people have, which is developing little crushes for other people of the opposite sex. It's just something natural. It doesn't mean that there's anything bad or wrong about your primary relationship, but how to handle that in such a way that it doesn't turn into something that is problematic. And honesty and self-awareness is really key.
I love that in theory. In reality, that scares me to death. So I just bringing something like that home is that's pretty heavy for most couples. I think we would need some strategies for that. I love this. I love this message. I love this conversation.
This is the relationship coach.
Yeah, Lisa, this is really great conversations. People don't have these conversations. The general strategy is, don't ask, don't tell. Sneak into each other's phones. All this kind of nonsense that people get into. And I think more conversations like this need to be happening with couples. I certainly need to do more in my relationship. So really appreciate your work. I'm excited to learn more about it. For listeners who would like to listen to your show, grab your book, follow you online, where's the best place for us to send them?
Certainly. Well, anybody can tune in to the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. I host that show, and we dive into all kinds of different topics that support people in the path of personal growth and relationship improvement and positive change. Also, our website, growingself.com, we always have articles and advice on the blog. And, on that last topic that we were talking about, one of the primary things that we really promote at Growing Self and on the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast is exactly this, is around authentic emotional intimacy and how to gain self-awareness and really the courage that it takes to come into relationships authentically and honestly, and not be afraid, but rather, instead of kind of concealing those things, bringing them out into the open in our relationships and using those as growth opportunities so that you can grow in your relationship and change and understand each other differently so that you can take that relationship to a new level.
I love it. I need to do this for sure. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Lisa. Really, really appreciate what you're doing. If you've heard about our yoga trapeze teacher training course that we've been now hosting in 5 different countries and of course in our home base in Barcelona, but you've been unable to come join us, I'm excited to announce our first ever online version of the course. We're doing an academic version with at-home study, at-home practice, with an option to join us in the future if you'd like. But if you can't join us in the future, or if you'd just like to do the at-home version, we're really excited. We've got a great group of people already joined the course, and it kicks off very, very soon here. To learn about how the course works and for full information, go to yogateacherscollege.com, and on the top navigation you'll see trainings, and click on calendar and you'll see a link to the course there. It's our online yoga trapeze teacher training course. It's a 25-hour Yoga Alliance continuing education course. We're super excited. The course starts in just a couple of days, and so check it out. If you have questions, feel free to get in touch. I hope you can join us. This week's nutritional tip is in response to a listener question. The listener JC says, Lucas, what do you think about canned tomato sauce and canned tomatoes? I read somewhere that they are the worst canned food. Why is that? We've talked about before that obviously the best type of food is fresh. The second best is frozen. Almost all of your nutritional properties are saved, and in some cases saved more if you freeze things when they're ripe, for example. It's better than when they're overripe. And then the third best is canned, or even better is jarred. The challenge with canning is not that it's inside of a can, it's what's inside the can is plastic lining. And many times it has BPA, bisphenol A in that lining, which is a xenoestrogen, it's an endocrine disruptor, and it messes up your hormones. And so the question about tomatoes specifically, tomatoes are very often come in a can, like stewed tomatoes, tomato sauce will very often come in a can, tomato soup, and tomatoes are very acidic. And so it's believed that tomatoes, because of their acidic nature, they leach more of that plastic into the food than other foods. Seems pretty likely that that's true. So many people avoid tomato sauces and stewed tomatoes that are in cans. I think that's a pretty good strategy. At the end of the day, you really have to pick your battles. There are xenoestrogens in many different things, so you have to figure out what makes sense. And there are also BPA-free lined cans, but of course there's some other kind of liner on that can which maybe will give you cancer or something else. I'm not really sure. Again, at the end of the day, you really have to pick your battles, but the argument against canned tomatoes is because of that bisphenol A. That's or it's because of the lining in the can, not the fact that canned food or preserved food is bad. That's not true. It's a pretty good way to preserve foods. It has to do with the lining on that can. So a jarred tomato, if you can get one at the farmer's market, is a better way to go. We're really geeking out here with some of these nutritional tips, but hopefully that's helpful. We have a question from listener Wendell this week. Wendell says, I really enjoy your podcast, especially the focus on health and fitness. I'm 51 years old. For the past 8 years now, I've been an avid runner and focused on health and fitness. My personal journey has now brought me to a plant-based diet with regular yoga sessions, including studio sessions, and 10 to 15 flows at home. I'm guessing that's 10 to 15 minutes. On a few occasions, I've done yoga instead of conventional stretches and then gone out for a 3 to 5 mile run or done some light weight training, which leads to my question, is it best to do yoga before or after aerobic and or strength training? So generally speaking, Wendell, we say yang before yin, night before day, dinner before dessert. And what that means is that if you're going to do something that requires maximum strength output, if you're going to do something that requires joint stability, you generally do that first. Now, most yoga classes are not yin in nature. In fact, a power yoga class, a hardcore vinyasa yoga class is very strong. It's very athletic. And so there's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you're doing 10 to 15 minute deep stretching routines before your run or your weight training, that's out of order. And that's not a great idea. When you do yin yoga, or as we teach gravity yoga with specific 4 to 8 breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, 2 to 5 minute holds, that creates temporary joint laxity and it creates temporary muscle weakness. You will have less power output. Your knees, your elbows, your shoulders, everything will be less stable for about 2 hours. It's a good practice. It's a healthy practice. It's an important part of practice, but it shouldn't be done before you're going for a run. It should be done after. So generally speaking, yang before yin, strength before flexibility, exertion before relaxation, dinner before dessert. Hope that's helpful.
This week's iTunes review is by Yen from Japan. Yen says, I find it very interesting to listen to your podcast because there are lots of beneficial and positive topics to listen to. Thanks very much for the podcast you share to the world. Best wishes to all the team and happy holidays to all. Yen, you have won the Yoga Trapeze. Email us at podcast@yogabody.com and we will get that to you.
If you're a regular Yoga Talk Show listener, you'll definitely want to get on my email list. Go to yogabody.com/sign me up. When you enter your email address there, we always have free giveaways every month, yoga straps, water bottles, discounts in our shop, and all kinds of other things. When you sign up at yogabody.com/sign me up, I'll send you just one email a week with updates about the show, special offers, new courses, and valuable information that I think you'll find useful. So go to yogabody.com/sign me up to claim your free prize now.